Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're going to talk about the path to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves sequel. How do we get the sequel to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves? It's a very good question, and it's a valid question, I think. And the question, it's really unique, because shouldn't the answer be we don't, right? It should be, but we have a distinct path to a sequel for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, specifically because, so why do we have a path to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves when we shouldn't, right? Well, the reason is because everything else is failing. DC Cinematic Universe, absolute garbage dumpster fire, with a new spray of propane on the top, which is Ezra Miller's The Flash, right? So Ezra Miller had just an array of problems with law enforcement, right, over 6 months. An amount that made what happened with Jonathan Majors look not highly significant, right? And it's a really bad look for Hollywood, because Warner Brothers is coming out and saying, hey, do you want to watch Ezra Miller's movie? It looked like he went on a crime spree for 6 months, but can you forget that? And America was like, no, we're not going to forget that. We're very concerned about that, and we're not going to see this movie. And it did $55 million on its opening weekend, and that is major. That is major, right? To the point where you're like, wow, that's really significant. And really, people didn't know, right? People were like, oh, nobody cares about people doing the right thing. I mean, we got a president who's a human monster. I mean, we had, Donald Trump for 4 years. He lied to his teeth constantly. Like, he told America that ethics don't matter, right? Did we all check ethics at the door years ago? And America's like, oh, well, politics is not as important as art. We want good people to do art. We're not going to take villains serving us up art. And that's what the Ezra Miller's 55 million Flash means, right? It's a huge, change in how we look at, it's a major influx, right? So what we're talking about today is, here is the new path to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Universal, major studio, Fast X and many others, and also one of the few studios in the world that actually have theme parks. Theme parks are important. Theme parks matter, right? And so it is really extremely important, just to see. So Universal is a major competitor, right? And Universal just said, we made $1 billion in 3 years with our fast theatrical release window. So right now, America is having a discussion and saying, are movies real? Should movies exist? Shouldn't we just shutter every single movie theater in America? This discussion was being had before the pandemic. Now it's still being had. And movies like Ezra Miller, they're like, yeah, this is a waste of time. Let's just do digital and streaming. There's no point in people going to these temples of attention and actually paying attention and not, and putting their phone down. And that's another thing, right? How many places in America right now where they're like, hey, I don't care, how many in America where they're like, hey, you're not going to use your phone here? How many places are left, right? It's a temple to attention. It is how real people who actually value art watch art. If you watch movies on digital and streaming and aren't ashamed of it, you don't know art. You don't experience art in the right way, right? You're a lesser person, right, than you can be. Not a lesser person than me. You still have the same value as me, right? But you're a lesser person than you can be, right? Art is part of our humanity, right? It's what divides us from animals. Animals don't do art, right? AI does art. Dead people do art. Live people do art, but animals don't make art yet. I do know about Coco. All right, let's keep moving. All right, so that's my point. Is this is a really, and so Universal said we made $1 billion in 3 years with a 17-day window, right? And the theater owners were PO'd. very vexed, very, very vexed about this 17-day window. So basically, and here's why we're talking, because this is the path to Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves sequel. So Universal comes out and they say, we have made $1 billion in 3 years with a fast to digital, fast to streaming model, right? 17-day window. And the entire industry said, this is wrong, right? Now the numbers are back. This is data. This is a pattern we need to look at. So $1 billion cannot be ignored. Cannot be ignored. And that's why OSE and that's why Knave and that's why Pathfinder are ignored in the industry, because they don't do billions of dollars of sales. They do millions, right? Great. My uncle's 3 shoe shops put up millions. Who cares, right? Like, are you a global property? Are you a global intellectual property? Can you put $1 billion on the board, right? Dungeons & Dragons has billions in sales. Billions with a B, right? Nothing else in the industry does. Nothing. Literally nothing in the tabletop role-playing game industry has billions in sales except Dungeons & Dragons, right? So, so Universal says we made $1 billion by shortening the theatrical window. Here's what's astounding about that, right? So Grace Randolph reported all this, and so she did a whole segment on this, and she said what really shocked the world was they said, what we realized is that the theatrical window, okay, the day one, Friday it drops. They watch it all weekend. It does half of its money in the first weekend, and then it does half of its money in the next 3 to 6 weekends. By the way, Dungeons & Dragons stayed in the top 10 of all American movies for 8 weeks. 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Okay? So your movie drops. That's the theatrical window. Get this. Universal said that the theatrical window was advertising for the digital sales. So that is the VOD, video on demand. People buying the digital version of the movie for $25. By the way, I find that a repugnant practice. I don't think I've ever done it once. Right? I wait until you can buy it for like $7.99 or whatever. Or I'll take the same $25 and I'll get 2 months of whatever service and watch it as much as I want for 2 months. I think only schmucks buy digital. It's weird. I don't think I've ever done it. So that's people who actually buy the movie on digital, 4K or whatever, for $25, right? And then rent it for $6. I've done that. I rent too. It's pretty rare, pretty darn rare. And the reason why is I have so many streaming services. There's never a point where I don't have something very engaging to watch, right? But every now and then I'll make an exception and I'll rent, right? I was considering renting the movie 65 the other day. It happens every now and then. It's not on any streamer I want. There's somebody in it I want to see. I want to see the movie. It's pretty rare. So digital and then streaming. So they sell their movies to different streaming services or their own streaming services. I'm not sure which streaming service Universal owns. Which one is it? I don't know. I think they sell their content to other streaming services, right? I know Warner Brothers owns Max, which used to be HBO Max. Nobody owns Netflix. Paramount Plus is a major streaming service, and then Prime Video, right? Which literally nobody owns them. Amazon owns them, right? So Universal is selling to these streaming services. That's $1 billion, right? Now that's really big money. It's big money, but you could counter and you could say, is it big money? Like Avatar made $2 billion, and that was just one movie. Aren't they wrong? No, they made $1 billion in 3 years. They made $1 billion through the Great Pandemic. That is major. That is important. That is real. That is real, right? That is very, very significant, right? And yes, you can make more, but and the problem is, since the Great Pandemic, only 2 movies have made $1 billion. Just 2, okay? Spider-Man and Avatar, right? And Avatar went over $2 billion, right? You cannot count out James Carpenter. So Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, it had garbage numbers, $207 million on at least on a budget of probably 150 million for the movie and 100 million, maybe 150 million. It was probably a $300 million budget. So absolute garbage numbers for a blockbuster, right? But Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves may still be in the mix. And the reason why is everything's failing. The Harry Potter series is failing. The Star Wars series is failing. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is failing. The DC Cinematic Universe is failing. And so even with garbage numbers, it's a globally recognized name brand, right? And so that still has value. That is still real, right? And so that's interesting. That means we arrive at this place where there's another path, right? And so the point of this video is to say, man, oh man, keep your eyes open. The ground is moving, right? Can you imagine, right, that Universal said, we're going to use the movie run to advertise and make people want to watch this on digital and streaming. And I have to admit, it has worked, right? We have Max, and I couldn't believe it. My family was like, oh, look at that. Shazam is playing on Max. Let's all sit down together and watch it. And they're like, that's a real movie. We saw the first one in theaters. Let's watch this together, right? So the point of this is, it is shocking that any movie studio, not a company, a movie studio, would say, we're going to use the theatrical play, to give value to the digital and the streaming. Right? That is like the small screen. Nobody cared. It was just like, but there's real changes in the mix. Real changes in the mix, right? And this makes an opportunity for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves to just get one engaged billionaire, right? Some international with a billion, some international billionaire, or some Silicon Valley billionaire to come in and say, yeah, I'm going to put up $250 million to make this sequel. Let's go, right? Because they want to be attached to real Hollywood. And that's something that was real. And that's something that the rest of the industry has not done. And that is a feather in the cap of Dungeons & Dragons. They're saying, hey, man, we are for realsies, right? Real Hollywood stars, real celebrity, real momentum. They didn't get the numbers, right? But nobody else is getting the numbers right now, right? And the entire model is changing, and that opens a possibility. That opens an exciting opening for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves sequel. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.